My colleague Brad, who is a doctoral student at the Con, and myself taught a course this semester, which turns out to be a little bit of a case study into surviving post-pandemic. So we wanted to report that to you all and see what you thought about it. The most common phrase we all heard in the pandemic is, "Can you hear me now?" We had a really distinct problem where we had an ensemble performance, contemporary performance class running, and we had to pivot it in a week to completely online. And as you know, we should possibly have given up right there, but we didn't. So we gave it a crack in terms of designing around building a performance course that was a metaphor for the journey of a musician in the pandemic, and to create lessons for a hybrid future. And that was kind of based on the idea that the show must go on and the opening night deadline is fixed. And we took what could have been a problem and turned it into a pretty interesting solution. In any situation, a band is hired, but the leader usually just asks, "What is the gig?" followed by, "What do I need and who do I need?" And therefore, the musicians only really need to know what they need to know in that circumstance. The producer or the band leader doesn't usually involve them in too many of the logistics. In this case, if we functioned as originally as band leaders, that was the case, except that what we found was that as we began to normalize an online ensemble process, which you're probably asking right now, how did you do that? We found that actually the band leaders became the students, and in that way it became this complex adaptive process where the students created meaning out of a situation that could have been quite complex. As Leonard Bernstein said, all we need is a plan and not enough time, and we had 1 week to pivot this course. And I wanted to point out a little bit of my research is into complex adaptive systems in rehearsal contexts, and that basically, in a nutshell, is that a complex system is in a state of continuous change, which every musical rehearsal is. But you have these nodes of behaviour. For example, you rehearse a particular phrase or a particular song, and then you repeat the positive elements of that, and they become regularities, and you build your patterns. And those patterns are different. If we're rehearsing a Beatles song that's exactly the same over the ages, a different group of personnel in a different context will create different patterns around that, rehearsing that piece. And also, complex systems can be destabilized and chaotic and self-destructive. And one of our concerns in building an ensemble course online was that would actually happen, given that students might already feel concerned, as a lot of the talks have discussed, concerned about their future and what they were doing studying music. And so we had to make sure that that the rehearsals that we were creating online actually had effective peer-to-peer engagement and true ensemble in a lag environment, to how to create true ensemble. And so we focused on what these nodes are in that context and how we could create regularities that were actually positive for students. So generally, when I teach this class, this performance ensemble class, which is open to the entire university, but you have to audition in, so you have to be competent and a gigging musician on any instrument, and we actually teach around the performing persona, and we teach experientially. So there's a fat lecture period at the beginning, and then we run a live seminar and live interactions and build ensembles in that process. Sada and Sweeney in 2016 described the present as post-normal times and an in-between period where old orthodoxies are dying and new ones have yet to be born, and very few things seem to make sense. And that's possibly the experience of some of our students when I told them that the course was still running. And a change in strategy, Ries describes that without a change in vision, as a pivot. So we really wanted to keep the vision of experiential learning, of creating a complex adaptive system that was able to move and change with the students' own needs and goals. And so what actually happened was in order to make that experiential learning happen online, we needed to think about the role and responsibilities of students, but also the meta ensemble of the faculty. So there are 3 of us teaching this course, originally 2, and this is where Brad comes in a second. And so I will let him describe his role in this, which turned out to be very interesting. So what is effective collaborative creativity? And this course pivot that we did raised 4 kind of fundamental educational design questions. One, is it possible to deliver meaningful musical ensemble content online, including the concepts that we really care about, which is musical citizenry and positive peer dynamics? Secondly, which technology could we deploy for optimal student experience in a lag environment? Thirdly, how could we leverage existing faculty skill sets and collaborative action to achieve those outcomes? And that's one of the interesting findings of our work. And the 4th thing is, what would be our recommendations for post-pandemic practice, given that the concept of hybrid learning, hybrid performing is becoming a big buzzword in the industry. So I'm going to get Brad to show you in a second how a set of normative behaviours that we normally use in this course also began to emerge fairly quickly in the new class framework. And we noticed a couple of adaptive patterns from this process. The first thing was we listened. We listened to the students. I've been in this course for the last 6 years, and I'm aware how students, due to student surveys, can change the objectives and outcomes of any course. But in this case, we listened to students right at the top of the course. And also I looked back on surveys in the past and thought about how we were creating improvisation in class, genuine mentoring connections, and peer-to-peer relationships that were altruistic and also empowering for students. The students wanted to have an ensemble class. Many of them are in 4th year. This was their last chance to perform at university, and we wanted an ensemble experience to happen. So the second thing we did was we pivoted. We changed instructional design. We ran it as performance, masterclass, team practice sessions, and most importantly, with improvisation. And we became a meta ensemble as teachers and facilitators, and we modelled the behaviour of an ensemble in our relationships between the 3 of us. So the hybrid framework that we ended up creating had the first thing it did was it undid assumptions of practice. It reframed our purpose. It created a mise en scène, or at least it created a place for and a look and a feel and an engagement between students and between us and the students. That was not only about performance but also about rehearsal. And then we reflected on it. So I'm going to throw to Brad now to talk about his part in this whole ensemble.
So my initial role was to listen to the brief for the gig. I had a preliminary Zoom call with Nell where I learnt that our job was to facilitate a live ensemble experience for students over the internet with an appropriate software solution, assuming there was one, and facilitate virtual ensemble rehearsals. I'd used the Soundtrap online digital audio workstation in Lockdown 1 and was aware of its affordances and limitations for collaborative music making. I also knew that real-time live group music making over the internet was virtually impossible due to latency issues. I suggested we pivot the course to almost real-time music making using Soundtrap, and the co-teaching team agreed. Despite the long list of unknowns, I knew I could rely on my TPAC, and as an improvising music educator, I would listen and respond in class as I would in a musical ensemble, adapting on the fly as I learnt in real time what was working and what needed to be redesigned. Soundtrap is built on its ease of use and offers built-in tutorials. Rather than replicate these, I decided to do a brief, bespoke exposition demonstrating how students could use the key features to collaborate for this project. My goal was to translate how students could virtually replicate the kinds of in real life experiences and interactions they would have in a musical ensemble experience and take them online. This quickly became a team ensemble exercise where each teacher also stepped into a specific role. Our boomerang idea was that the Zoom would remain open. Students would work in breakout rooms and then return to the main room as needed. This replicated live ensemble making where a master teacher floats between ensembles. My role was to pop in to each of the breakout rooms to work with the students in a kind of music producer role, equal parts coach, negotiator, arranger, encourager, in a kind of virtualization of live ensemble making.
10 minutes.
Soundtrap offered some unique affordances in that I could pre-listen moments after students recorded, respond with a text comment, and even make adjustments, edit, or musical contributions. This drastically reduced the need for technical conversations and moved our Zoom conversations to a more reflective space. During this process, we became aware of the meta-ensemble complex adaptive system that we co-teachers had formed. We used the liminal spaces between activities to check in, asking what just happened, what worked, what didn't work, how will we adjust what we do next, what role will we take in the next part of the session. This approach allowed us to quickly define our roles and design an approach to co-teaching that owed as much to our experience as musicians as it did to our experience as teachers. In collaboration mode, students could video conference one-to-one and the entire group and staff could text chat in the app. Each member would sync their take to the cloud when they were happy with it, making it instantly available to everyone within the session. When we're live on stage, we use verbal and visual cues to discuss the song's arrangement before, during, and after the performance. To replicate this online, we used an arrangement track. Each region represented a section of the song. Students negotiated the arrangement in advance to allow each student to record when it suited them. Students used common terms like verse and chorus, and when they didn't know what to call a section, they invented their own shared language. The chat panel provided fascinating insight into the students' processes and gave real-time feedback to ensemble members and staff. This conversation is an excellent example of the kinds of problem solvings the students would engage in. Common themes here such as, where did my work go? It's not me, it's the software, and even some misdirection from a bandmate. The chat was also utilised for a myriad of musical conversations, the kind you might have in the rehearsal room or maybe yelled into the guitarist's ear on stage. This kind of clarification chat gave the students the confidence to press on. Another surprising use was chat as form of musical notation. We see here two singers are duetting and they've pasted an amended lyrics sheet to allow them to read their bespoke arrangement in the app as they record. Chat was also used for social interaction, encouragement and celebration, as we see here. This chat is indicative of the SMS-style chatting the groups engage in. Students use Facebook as a private back channel for private communication between the group, although they did occasionally forget we were in Soundtrap with them, as this student realised. Zoom provided the glue for everyone, essentially a virtual green room where class would start, the Zoom would stay open for students to pop in and out, and then into the breakout rooms and back to the main meeting. And that's it. That was my experience. Nell, what did we learn?
So the faculty functioned as a glue or an umbrella, a bridge to segue changes and provide individual expertise. Role delineation and migration was clear and effective and created patterns between the three of us. So I functioned as course coordinator and created I created the concept or the work around the performing persona, and then I pivoted that onto the online performing persona. Obviously, Brad originally was brought on just as a tech expert, but his role expanded because of the way that we so easily moved as an ensemble together, much like bringing in a new drummer or a new bassist. And Simon, the other teacher in the class, functioned as in the meta ensemble as perhaps the guitarist who was always creating new licks and new ideas. around people's adaptations of their songs. In this way, faculty became the intermediary between the tool and the end user, supplying content, technical and musical knowledge, functioning as a nimble, recursive, and collaborative meta ensemble.
1 minute.
Students bought into these effective ensembles, and they portrayed many of the traits of a live ensemble in the end. Their online conversations, their class interactions showed their understanding of the true nature of an ensemble, and the faculty work mirrored this. Students developed these new languages and new algorithms for their work, and they upskilled in tech that can be used for future collaborations. These recordings that they did are publishable. They're quality recordings. We haven't shared them here tonight just because of time, but if anyone's interested, please send us an email and we're happy to share. They're amazing work. Brad, did you want to close off, or we'll let people ask questions?
Let's cut to the chase and go straight to the questions, should there be any.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Narelle and Brad. That was just fantastic. Wow. Brilliant. I love it. Anyone from the floor, any from the virtual room, would you like to have any questions for Nell and Brad? You can use the hands up or jump on the mic. Renee said this was so good and so interesting. I can relate to so much of the experiences and laughed at the sound trip charts, definitely. And Kath's just like, wow, what a pivot. Congratulations. Yeah. Yeah, Sue's just noticed that this really opens up internal collaboration. Is that something that you are thinking of perhaps doing in future?
We're actually thinking to maintain a sound trap exercise when we go back live. I actually did a live day. We managed to sneak that in when Sydney opened up again. Did a live day, and lots of students chose just to keep their sound trap work as their ensembles. So they just came to the live day for fun, just to hang out. But so actually, the utility and the value of this, it's not just a trick that we pulled off to get through lockdown. It actually has some utility and some function, mainly because we saw that positive human engagement occurred, which is important for ensemble. Delineation of roles occurred, also important. There were porous boundaries, there was improvisation, and creativity occurred. So all of those things are vital skills for ensemble players. So we saw it as a huge success. We saw their ensemble behaviours and our ensemble behaviours as mirroring each other, and definitely usable if any of you want to take that into your own practice. Definitely usable, and we were all sceptical when we started.
Excellent. Wonderful. Any other questions from? Do have a hand up? And who would that be? Sean.
Thanks, Di. Thanks, Narelle and Brad. That was awesome. I really enjoyed it, and I felt some sympathy, I suppose is the word, with going through the same kind of thing. I just wondered, the music, was it a blend of originals and covers, or was it all originals? And what type of bands, like in terms of size and instrumentation, just thinking about challenges with different instruments, acoustic versus electric, and that kind of thing, plugging in and not being able to plug in so easily to Soundtrap.
So I'll speak, and then Brad, maybe if you talk about how people did some workarounds there. The largest ensemble was actually, Sean, 15 people, and they did it pretty quickly. And I think there were maybe, I can't remember, possibly 5 vocals. Obviously, vocals are hard to get rhythmically to work. But so that was the largest, down to kind of 3-person ensembles. That was the minimum, but generally at least 5 in an ensemble. Brad, do you want to talk about the workarounds?
Yeah, well, I think it was just really exciting to see the way when we were forced, even if we wanted to be prescriptive about things, we couldn't be. And so that meant that there was a lot of ingenuity required from everybody. And it was just really fascinating to see the way students solved problems. And so if you didn't have an instrument, Soundtrap allows you to play MIDI instruments on your QWERTY keyboard. And I think rather than, but also at the same time, it meant that you could have a multitude of instruments. So all of a sudden, multi-instrumentalists, or not even multi-instrumentalists, became multi-instrumentalists as it became, we have unlimited tracks. What would you like to do? And we talked a lot about just put it down and hit the mute button, and let's talk about it later. Get the ideas down. And so Soundtrap is the repository where you could actually, rather than have to say, what do you think about this? You could put down a bunch of ideas and hit the mute button on a variety of instruments. What do you think? Maybe I'll play the violin, or maybe I'll play the synthesized violin, or maybe we'll do both. There was lots of that sort of thing. And just watching students not only just invent, but also as they confronted these barriers to just think, well, I've never plugged my V drums into my computer before. I didn't know you could, but now I have to. And so we saw lots of those kind of getting over the walls and getting through them sometimes by whatever means necessary. And the I guess the choices the students made were just fascinating, and most often, almost all the time, were better than the ones I think I would have come up with for them.
Cool. Thanks so much. That's great.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you very much, Narelle and Brad. That was truly innovative and inspiring. And there's hope for us for 2022 yet. And I think you're going to get bombarded with lots of phone calls and emails somehow. So congratulations. That was fantastic.